The truth is, the scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your fucking ass.
Welcome to the Deadly Diaries, where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime. In this episode, we travel to the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, where a brutal and senseless crime shattered a community and left the nation in shock. 4 young students were found savagely murdered in their off-campus home. No suspects, no known motive, and a town gripped by fear. What followed was a gripping manhunt, a digital trail of obsession, and a suspect whose background in criminology raised chilling questions about his intent. This is the story of Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in their sleep. Kaylee Jade Goncalves was born on June 8, 2001, in Concord, California, the middle child of 5 siblings in a big, loving family. When Kaylee was just a year old, her family moved to North Idaho. It was there that Kaylee met someone who had become central to her life, Madison Mogen. The two were instantly inseparable. Kaylee later convinced her parents to let her attend Lake City High School, and when it came time for college, there was never any doubt. She and Maddie would go together. At the University of Idaho, Kaylee joined the Alpha Phi sorority and pursued a degree in general studies. Kaylee had just landed a job in Austin, Texas, and was preparing to start a new chapter. Madison May Mogen, known to most as Maddie, was born on May 25, 2001. She grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and from a young age she was full of charm, confidence, and laughter. At the University of Idaho, Maddie studied marketing, was a member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority, and worked part-time at the Mad Greek restaurant in downtown Moscow, where Mogen used her marketing skills to run social media campaign for the business. She was 21 years old, intelligent, kind, and ready to chase her future. Xana Kernodle was born on July 5, 2002 in Arizona, but spent most of her life in Idaho after moving there with her family. She was a junior at the University of Idaho, majoring in marketing, and a member of Pi Beta Phi, just like her roommate Madison, and worked part-time at the Mad Greek restaurant. Xana was known for her outgoing, playful personality. She loved dancing, joking around, and being the life of the party. At the time of the murders, Xana was in a committed relationship with Ethan Chapin. The two were often seen together, smiling, goofing off, and enjoying college life to the fullest. Kernodle was roommates and friends with 21-year-old Madison Mogen and 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves. Ethan Chapin was born on October 28, 2002. He was one of 3 siblings, triplets in fact, who all enrolled together at the University of Idaho. Ethan was a freshman studying recreation, sport, and tourism management, and a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity. He had an easygoing personality, a constant smile, and a love for sports, his family, and life itself. Ethan and Xana had been dating, and on the night of the attack, he had decided to stay over at her house. His life, filled with warmth, humor, and kindness, was just beginning. It was a quiet, cold night in Moscow, Idaho, November 12, 2022. The small college town was winding down for the weekend. Students were out at parties, attending campus events, or just settling in for the night. Inside the King Road home, 6 University of Idaho students had returned from a typical Saturday out. Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, and Xana Kernodle lived in the 3-story rental home, along with 2 other roommates, both of whom were also home that night. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen had spent the evening at a local bar called the Corner Club. Surveillance footage showed them leaving around 1:30 a.m. and stopping by a food truck before heading home by 2 a.m. Inside the house, their roommates Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin had returned from a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity just a short walk away. Two other roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, were also home that night, sleeping on the lower level of the three-story house. By 2 a.m., all 6 people were inside the King Road home. Between 2:26 and 2:52 a.m., a series of calls were placed from Kaylee's phone to her former long-term boyfriend, 7 in total. During the same time frame, Madison's phone made 3 more calls to the same number. Authorities later confirmed that the man was not involved in the crime. Investigators believe that the attack occurred sometime between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Xana Kernodle appears to have been awake around that time. Records show she received a DoorDash delivery at approximately 4 a.m. and her TikTok app was in use at 4:12 a.m. One of the surviving roommates, believed to be Dylan Mortensen, reported being awakened by noises on the 3rd floor. At first, she thought it was Kaylee playing with her dog. Then, she heard a voice say something like, "There's someone here." Investigators believe the voice may have actually been Xana's. The roommate opened her door but saw nothing. She reported later hearing what sounded like crying coming from Xana's room. A second time, she opened her door and heard a male voice, calm and low. "It's okay. I'm going to help you." A nearby security camera picked up whimpering, a loud thud, and a dog barking repeatedly, all beginning around 4:17 a.m. The roommate opened her door again and saw a man, dressed in black clothing and wearing a mask over his mouth and nose. She told police he walked past her toward the sliding glass door and exited without saying a word. She described herself as being in a frozen shock phase, then locked herself in her room. At 4:26 a.m., the 2 surviving roommates finally met. On the way downstairs, Dylan saw Xana on the floor of her bedroom. At the time, she assumed Xana may have been intoxicated. The 2 roommates locked themselves in the same bedroom and tried to contact the others, texting and calling, but received no response. Hours passed. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was made from one of the surviving roommates' phones. The caller requested medical help for an unconscious person. Friends of the victims had arrived at the home by then, after being called by the surviving roommates. When police entered the house, the front door was open. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be missing. The bodies of all 4 victims were discovered on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Kaylee and Madison were found together in Madison's bed on the 3rd floor. Xana and Ethan were found in Xana's bedroom on the 2nd floor. None of the victims had been restrained or gagged. The walls were spattered with blood. Autopsy reports revealed that Xana suffered over 50 stab wounds, while Kaylee had more than 20. Goncalves' dog, who had been in the home, was found alive and unharmed on the 3rd floor. By noon, all 4 victims were officially pronounced dead. The murders had taken place in less than 30 minutes, and the killer had vanished without a trace. Within hours of the crime scene being discovered, Moscow police faced the unimaginable. 4 young college students had been brutally murdered inside their own home. There was no suspect, no weapon, and no clear motive. The town of Moscow, Idaho, a quiet college town with just over 25,000 residents, was in shock. Vigils were held, the University of Idaho campus was on edge, and parents across the country watched anxiously as details slowly emerged. Behind the scenes, investigators were working around the clock. Surveillance footage, cell tower data, and a single piece of physical evidence would begin to point them toward a suspect. One of the first major breakthroughs came from security camera footage. Just before 2:45 a.m. on the morning of the murders, a white Hyundai Elantra was seen driving through the King Road neighborhood. Over the next hour, the vehicle made several passes near the victim's home between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m. Later, around 5:25 a.m., the same car was captured heading back toward Pullman, Washington, a small city just 10 miles away, home to Washington State University. A national alert went out, asking for help locating the vehicle. Weeks later, a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, registered to a man named Bryan Kohberger, came to the attention of police. Kohberger was a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University. Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, investigators had found a piece of evidence that would prove critical. On the bed next to Madison Mogan, police discovered a tan leather knife sheath. Inside the snap of the sheath was a single male DNA sample. It didn't match anyone in the National CODIS database. Using forensic genetic genealogy, authorities traced the DNA to trash recovered outside a home in Pennsylvania, the residence of Bryan Kohberger's parents. The match was confirmed. Police now had a name and a growing mountain of evidence. Cell tower records also placed Kohberger near the scene. His phone had pinged in the vicinity of the crime scene just after 4:45 a.m. on the morning of the murders. But even more suspicious, his phone had been turned off or on airplane mode between 2:47 and 4:48 a.m., the exact time frame the murders are believed to have occurred. Records would later show that Kohberger had been in the King Road neighborhood at least a dozen times before the night of the killings, mostly late at night or in the early morning hours. Authorities believe these were premeditated visits. On December 30, 2022, Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. The early morning raid was carried out by a SWAT team. Inside the home and in his Hyundai Elantra, authorities seized multiple items, including black gloves, a face mask, and electronics. At his apartment in Washington, police found a mattress cover with reddish-brown stains, human hairs, and what appeared to be blood. Kohberger was extradited to Idaho, where he was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. His arrest brought some relief to a grieving community, but it also raised chilling questions. Why these victims? Was this a calculated crime, or something else entirely? And what drove a criminology student, someone who studied the minds of killers, to allegedly commit one of the most brutal murders the state had ever seen? Bryan Christopher Kohberger was born on November 21, 1994, in Pennsylvania. He graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in Brodheadsville in 2013. Shortly after, he enrolled at Monroe Career and Technical Institute in Bartonsville, but left the program within a year. By 2015, Kohberger was working as a security officer for the Pleasant Valley School District, a job that would later stand in stark contrast to the accusations against him. In 2018, he earned an associate degree in psychology from Northampton Community College. He continued his education at DeSales University in Center Valley, Pennsylvania, where he completed both a bachelor's and a master's degree. His graduate studies focused on criminal justice, and in 2022, he received his M.A. That same year, Kohberger moved across the country to begin a Ph.D. in criminology at Washington State University in Pullman, just 8 miles from Moscow, Idaho. He worked as a teaching assistant while taking doctoral courses and was known by classmates for his sharp intellect, but also for his socially awkward and sometimes uncomfortable demeanor. In the weeks leading up to the killings, faculty at WSU had grown concerned about Kohberger's behavior, particularly how he interacted with female students. A formal meeting was held to address complaints, and just 1 month later, on December 19th, he was removed from his teaching assistant position due to performance and conduct issues. Kohberger has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder. In online posts made prior to the crimes, he described suffering from persistent mental health struggles, including tinnitus, and a neurological condition known as visual snow syndrome, which distorts a person's vision with static-like interference. Despite his academic focus on criminology and his fascination with criminal behavior, Kohberger would soon find himself at the center of one of the most chilling cases in recent history. On December 30, 2022, Bryan Kohberger was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. He was held without bond and extradited to Idaho in early January 2023. Nearly 3 years after the horrific murders, no public explanation has been given for why Bryan Kohberger targeted the 4 students, young lives he had no known connection to. Kohberger appeared in court several times, and in May 2023, a grand jury formally indicted him on all charges. Despite refusing to enter a plea, the judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. By June 2023, prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, and Kohberger was denied bond. In early 2024, the defense was granted access to forensic evidence under seal, including results from genetic genealogy testing on a touch DNA sample found on the knife sheath left at the crime scene. a key piece of evidence that first led investigators to Kohberger. On June 30th, 2025, a plea deal was reached. Bryan Kohberger himself has remained silent on any motive, but instead plead guilty to all charges, avoiding the death penalty. In exchange, he would receive 4 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus an additional 10 years for burglary. On July 2, 2025, Kohberger formally entered his guilty plea. 3 weeks later, on July 23, he was sentenced. Along with his life sentences, he was ordered to pay $250,000 in fines and $20,000 in restitution to the victims' families. This plea deal closed a painful chapter for the community, ending the trial but leaving lingering questions about the motive behind the brutal killings. The absence of motive leaves a chilling void, reminding us that sometimes the darkest crimes defy explanation. The house at 1122 King Road, just steps from the heart of the University of Idaho campus, where the murders took place, no longer stands. A year after the tragedy, the university decided to tear down the grey-shuttered 3-story home, calling it a grim reminder of that fateful night. The lives of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zanika Nodal, and Ethan Chapin were tragically cut short in a senseless act of violence that shocked their community and the nation. Each was a bright young person with dreams, friends, and family who loved them dearly. Though justice has been served through the guilty plea and sentencing of Bryan Kohberger, nothing can erase the profound loss felt by everyone who knew them. Their memories live on in the hearts of their families, friends, and the University of Idaho community. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Deadly Diaries. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to stay connected with stories that matter. And remember, if you or someone you know is in danger, please seek help. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and never stop asking why.